12 on the nose. We're just waiting for the last of the attendees to step in. So we'll give another minute or two.
Oh, that's.
If you guys wouldn't mind just hitting mute on your side. Welcome if you're just joining us. We should be kicking off in the next minute or two. We're just waiting for the last of the attendees to join. I hope everyone got their lunch vouchers and ordering something nice during the session. The session will be pretty quick. We're going to try and stick to an hour as close as possible, and we will kick off in a couple of minutes. Welcome, guys. I see a couple more entering. We'll be kicking off shortly.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Vish. Right. We are at 36 attendees. I think a couple more might join in the next minute or two, but we're going to kick off just so that we stick to time. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Bytes and Bytes session today in partnership with Microsoft and Argantic. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brian Timperley. I'm the Chief Executive at Turrito, and I'm joined today by Garry Ackerman, who's the founder of Argantic, as well as Luc de Kock, who's one of their product specialists. And they'll be taking us through a brief presentation on Microsoft Intune, as well as a live demo. So Intune is essentially about device management, enabling businesses to audit their own devices, enforcing company policy from the cloud, and enhancing their security as well as compliance. We try to keep these sessions very short and to the point. So if you do have any questions during the session, just make a note of it. We'll have a brief Q&A session right at the end to cover those. And we hope you enjoy the lunch vouchers that we provided as well. So without further ado, I will hand over to the subject matter experts. So over to you, Garry. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. And thanks, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to present to you today. Luckily, it's going to be a little bit of PowerPoint and a whole bunch of demo. So we're looking forward to that. Luke's going to be handling the demo part of it, and I'll take you through the intro part of it. To contextualize our discussion, and I know we're talking about Intune today, but understanding where Intune fits into the bigger picture is quite important when looking at a lot of the Bytes and Bytes presentations we've been doing over the last few weeks. So if any of you have been at any of those previous Bytes and Bytes presentations, you'll know that we've been talking extensively about preparing for AI. The AI, I mean, it's all over the news at the moment. And as organizations, we're all clamoring to understand what the impact is going to be. What do we need to do? We've protected our environment, we've protected the data, we've protected our users and our stakeholders. So you'll also see that when we had the conversation around preparing your environment for AI, you will notice that there is a very similar process that you go through when you deal with straightforward compliance. And the tools that are involved with this are also very similar. So we've bundled those two topics together into the whole preparedness landscape. When you're dealing with AI and compliance, they're very much the same sort of process that you've got to go through. The two things that you are preparing to avoid is, and I spoke about this in the AI preparedness, is what we call overshare. And that is where users inadvertently give access to data to external parties or bad actors. And as a result of that, that makes access control and who can access your data when, where, very, very important. In the preparedness discussion, though, we also came up with two very important first steps that need to be taken in order for you to be able to define any sort of policies or protection or have any sort of view of the information that you have and the protections that you need to be putting in place. And we call this the modern data estate. And this has got two parts to it. The first part is the modern, and that means that as an organization, modern organizations, we need to make sure that the data platforms we use are modernized. And by modernized, we mean can plug into the telemetry that is exposed by things like Purview and Intune to give you a view of where your data is and what policies have been applied and what data you actually own. Modernization could be as simple as putting your data in something like Office 365 and using the tools that are available to you there, and using modern databases like SQL Server. There are other platforms that plug into this telemetry as we go along, and we can talk about those later on. But the whole point of it is if you've got legacy databases, applications, and file servers sitting in the corner, those are not modern, they're legacy, and they're exposing you to risk, and they need to be dealt with. The second part of the equation is the data estate. And essentially what this means, it's a very fancy term that means where is your data? In the past, this was easy. You could draw a line around your domain and your servers that were sitting in the on-premise and the desktops that were there, and you had the odd device that used to leave the office. And you could draw very easily, IT could draw a line around where your data estate boundaries were and where your data existed. You fast forward to the modern era, and that becomes very, very blurred. And that's where the tools that we're talking about are vitally important when it comes to all of these strategies about preparing for AI, compliance, and defining a data estate. When you look at some of the tools that we've talked about previously on the Bytes and Bytes, a couple of weeks ago, there was a very interesting talk about Microsoft Entra ID. And without identity, you don't have security. And it's the foundation, it's the item that if I had to draw a stack, it's the one that sits right at the bottom, and everything else sits on top of it. Without Entra ID, nothing else will work from a security or a policy perspective. When you look at platforms like SharePoint, Exchange, and Microsoft Azure, those are typical examples of modernized platforms that will link in to your policies and identity to ensure that you have adequate control and protection mechanisms in place, and that there are policies that you apply from an organizational perspective for the purpose of either compliance or security or data protection are applied at every level, regardless of where the data exists and who the user is that's accessing them. Purview, once again, a presentation we did a few weeks ago, is the tool that Microsoft has presented that allows you to define the policies that needs to encompass this data. It allows you to identify the data itself, and it is also the tool that you use to define the edges of your data estate. The item we're talking about today, however, is called Microsoft Intune. And in this diagram, it's one of the most important components in this grander strategy. In the past, Microsoft Intune used to be referred to as a mobile device manager, but it has now evolved to be a far more useful tool that aligns with a lot of our modern strategies and a lot of risks and a lot of challenges that we have. When you look at the word mobile device management, and by the way, we're still seeing this term mobile device management being used extensively, and that was in the past when mobile device management was evolving. It was all about devices that were mobile outside of the domain or the on-premise environment. So, the evolution of tablets and some smartphones. Nowadays, mobile devices is actually any device that a user will gain access to, even certain desktop type devices. So when you look at the definition of mobile devices, you can actually drop the word mobile. I think it's just a legacy reference. It's all device management is now encompassed within Microsoft Intune, and its focus is around the data that resides on these devices and who can access it. To give you, for those who don't know, to give you a bit of an intro into what Microsoft Intune does, it's got three very well-defined focus areas. The first one is the device, the configuration of that device, and the preparing of that device for both the user interaction and also the data that's going to be stored on it. The interactions or the definitions of that configuration of the device is actually applied through the policies that you define and the use case scenarios that you define for those devices. The second focus area is the data that's going to be stored on those devices, who can access it, how long it lives, and how it is protected while it's on that device. The third focus area is the applications that can get installed on those devices. And this is quite important as well, because it's now extended to a point where when you install these applications, Intune will define the policy of what can actually be installed. And once the applications are installed, it's how they are configured to meet with your security and compliance protocols. So that's a very broad definition of what Intune actually is. Some of the key features that we refer to when talking about Autopilot that define the majority of what it brings to the table is in this list here. And I'm going to give you a quick reference to them. And it's a great introduction to Luke's start of the presentation, because I think he'll be able to get a lot more of this across in the demo itself. But to give you a bit of a highlight, a high-level view of the components or the features that make Intune as special as what it is. The first one is Autopilot, and that's about deploying Windows machines, auto-deploying them with the configurations that you need and preparing those devices for the data and the users that are going to use them. Conditional access is very important. In the modern world, we think this is one of the most important components of your policy controls. It's about defining the rules around which your network and data can be accessed and how users will access and from where. Device compliance monitoring is just to make sure that any devices that access your environment or data can actually meet your minimum security and or compliance requirements. Security policy enforcement is for smart devices to make sure that where security is enabled on those devices, or that first and foremost that security is enabled and that minimum standards are enforced on those devices, like minimum pin lengths or the absolute requirement for biometrics or MFA if that's required, and any sort of encryption that might need to be enforced on those devices. Application management, as I said to you earlier, it's very simply, it defines what applications can be installed and when they are installed, how they are installed to ensure that they meet your security and compliance standards. And then device inventory tracking. We talk about this whole item of a data estate and drawing a boundary around the data that your organization manages and owns, and you can't do that without an inventory. So the device inventory tracking, which is one of the oldest features in Intune, is probably still one of the most important. And it tracks everything. In the modern world, we're talking about phones, tablets, virtual devices all over the place. It's virtually endless in terms of its definition. And as I mentioned earlier, anything that a user is going to access is something that Intune aims to manage for you. And then the role-based access control. This is a very important feature that Intune and Entra ID work in conjunction with each other. This is addressing the issue of making sure that users only have access to the data they need to have access to when they need access to it. That's what role-based access control is all about. And then the last one, which is also very, very important, is giving you a dashboard view of the activities of Intune. That is, where there are deficiencies, where you need to take care of things to make sure that your environment is auditable. And as Intune evolves and the security standards evolve worldwide, to keep up to date with the changes and make sure that you are remediating risks as they arise. So without any further PowerPoint, I'm going to hand over to Luke to get into the demo for us. Luke.
Alrighty. Good afternoon, everyone. We know that in the call today, there will be quite a spread of usage or experience in Intune. So there will be some people that have just clicked through some screens. There will be others that have worn out their mouse buttons, going through everything that Intune has to offer, because it is possible to do that. So for the demo, our main focus is just to concentrate on what I would call the meat and potatoes. So the best value that you could and should be using Intune for if you have the license. We're not going to dive into depth into each of the areas that I'm going to touch on, as it will be a rabbit hole that we can go down. but what I will do is I have selected one very cool feature. It's relatively new. It's something that we love to do in the past through GPOs. It wasn't available in Intune, and it has recently been revamped and released via Intune. So that is the one that we will go into detail on. So in your day-to-day management of your devices, I think firstly to just highlight an area of Intune that is often overlooked is down here on the left-hand side, so troubleshooting and support. If you're familiar with the rest of the Office 365 portal, whenever you click a support button, this generally takes you to a place where you can log a call with Microsoft or view articles online. However, in the Intune portal, it's actually very useful to go in and do some diagnostics based on things that have happened in your tenant. So for example, let me just use test data. We have connected accounts and devices just so that there is some relevant data to take a look at. So let's say you've used Intune to deploy something to a device. There's an issue. It's not reflecting. What we do is go to the troubleshooting and support option. We search for the user. You can also filter by device if that is something you're looking for, as well as you can use these headings up here if you're trying to drill down on something specific that you're looking for. But just from the summary page, I can get a quick glance at everything that's happening on this device that I've set up, and also very quickly get an idea, is everything compliant, has everything installed, are there any policies that are failing, etc. I can also then see what is linked to me, so the devices, and that's a quick way to jump into, I know it's on, let's say, for example, this on the laptop. I can sort by device to quickly drill down faster and deeper into finding out what's going wrong with the user that I'm supporting. Okay, so a lot of the magic and most of the magic happens here in the devices tab. This is a nice way to just see what is connected to the tenant. Obviously, this is only going to show what has currently been enrolled into Intune. The overview tab is again a nice way to just take a snapshot of what's happening in your environment. Is there any devices that we need to work on their compliance? Is there any devices that have policies or scripts that we've pushed that have errors? And again, going and clicking on these will drill down into those separate categories that we can take a look at. It also just shows you how many devices you have per operating system or platform. Okay. Then a very nice feature or important feature in Intune is your enrollment. So you would use this page to set up a bunch of different enrollment options. You can see how we can do our automatic enrollment. We can also give some device platform restrictions. So this is if we have a policy, we allow certain operating systems, but not others. Let's say we want to ban Linux or maybe Android, we can go and set that there. Co-management settings. So this is a useful tool for people who, for whatever reason, are tied to a previous configuration manager, the most popular being SCCM. There were people that invested in SCCM, had it deployed. Intune came out right in the beginning. There wasn't really very good feature parity. Maybe you're just comfortable with SCCM. You can set things into a co-managed state. And as you get more familiar and comfortable with Intune, you can actually shift workloads off from SCCM and move them over to Intune. So that's where we would set those up. We can put device limit restrictions, how many devices each user can enroll, and so on. So another big section here is autopilot. This is just setting up an automated flow so that the device doesn't necessarily have to be sent to you as an administrator. It can be sent directly to the end user. And once the end user switches it on, connects to the network and puts in their password, all the automatic enrollments, apps, policies that you've set up automatically pushes through to that device. We then have the configuration option. So the way I would describe this, this is pretty similar to, I would call it more like the GPO section for everyone who's used to controlling devices and doing everything through GPO. It is split through Intune, but 90% of what you can do in a group policy object, you can do here via a device configuration profile. So Just like many of the windows we will run through, you simply just create, you will select the policy, and then you will select the platform you're using and what type of profile you're selecting. We won't do a deep dive through that, but one nice thing I'll point out is if you know what you're looking for, you can simply use the settings catalog. So you will be presented with a whole bunch of settings that you can then go and sift through and change and configure as needed. But you also have the option to just add a template. So you can scroll through these and say, okay, well, I'm looking for an endpoint protection set of options, and then you can go ahead and select that template and then configure it as you desire. Alrighty, then we get to another important tool inside of Intune, which is just managing compliance. So basically what this is a set of rules that you will decide. What does it mean in my environment for a device to be compliant? There's quite a few options. Some organizations would have very simple. I just want it to be a minimum version of Windows, and I want to make sure that a security scan has run in the last week. Yes, so there is quite a few options here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm just going to highlight an example of this. So you can see a device health option. So you could also say, I want to have secure boot enabled. I want to have BitLocker enabled. I'd like to have Defender up to date and scanned within a certain amount of time. And I'd like to have to block simple passwords. Once you've finished configuring the policy, and again, this will sift through into all of the policies that we create, you would just basically assign it to the group or user that you want, and then assign it. You can also choose some actions for non-compliance. So maybe you want to give a device some grace. It needs to have done a scan in the last week, but you will then want to give it 3 days to catch up. Maybe the person didn't have the device open that day, and you can just give it basically a timer to set that it's allowed to not meet the requirements for a certain amount of days before it is now then marked non-compliant. Alrighty, conditional access, we won't jump too much into. I'm sure most people who have done conditional access before would have done it through Entra ID, but it is just the similar feature set of setting in conditions, adding, for example, named locations. So when we deal with some companies that get targeted attacks from certain countries, such as Russia or China, we go and create it as a named location, and we set a conditional access to say, if you are trying to sign in from one of these locations, automatically block the sign-in request, as well as, for example, putting in the public IP of an office and saying, well, if the user is signing in from this location, we know it's the office, we know they're connected to our network, and so we will not require MFA for 30 days, etc. So that's the conditional access point. It does integrate and tie in with what you're used to in Entra. So capturing it here will also capture it in your Entra portal. Scripts and remediations are just, if you want to get a little bit more technical, as I mentioned, there is most of the GPO options are available in Intune. There are very few that I've come across that are no longer in Intune, or sorry, not yet in Intune. So the feature parity is almost like for like. In fact, there are some things I've recently found in Intune that are not available in GPO. So Microsoft's definitely moving their attention towards building up Intune. But if you do come across something that you just cannot get right, we have the option to put in scripts and remediations. So this is both a configuration script, a doing something script, as well as a remediation script. So a remediation script is basically a script that only kicks in if an issue appears. So your script can check for, has the user reset the password in the last 30 days, for example, and if they haven't, then the remediation is your little pop-up in Windows notifications saying, hey, please consider changing your password. Alrighty. Then the last thing we will touch on in the devices menu for now, we will swing back in a second, is just handling your Windows updates. So for those of you who have traditionally used WSUS, This is another nice way to control the updates on devices. Again, it pulls everything into one console. We have the troubleshooting option to go and drill down and diagnose devices that haven't had Windows updates. So basically what we would do is just create an update ring. So very similar to what we saw before, you would go ahead and create a profile, and then you would just click through all of your settings. So setting product updates, whether they can get drivers, etc. And you can do this for feature updates, as well as quality updates, as well as controlling your driver updates. So again, these things maybe are available in other tools. What's nice about Intune is it pulls everything into one pane of glass, and you can manage that device end to end using the different policies and menus sitting here in Intune. Okay, I'm going to quickly jump over to apps. So apps can get very complicated, and you can keep it easy. So with apps, basically what we would do in this menu is just we want to create a local store of all the apps that we use in our environment, and we want to be able to push them remotely to the devices. So the two main ways of doing this, again, we're not going to go through it in detail, but if there is anything in any of these menus that I've shown that you do want more help with, 100% happy to do a private session with everyone. Just reach out to whoever your current contact person is. But here in the apps, we would just go and create them. In a perfect world, every single app would have an MSI. And if you do have an MSI for an app, you basically select that it is an MSI app, and you upload it, and Intune will go and do everything. It will give you the install commands. It'll give you detection scripts to make sure it's on your device, and it will just automate everything. If it's not an MSI, unfortunately, you do have to do a little bit more work. So you have to package the app using an Intune utility, and you have to supply the installation commands and the detection scripts yourself. But once it's in, you upload the app once, and from then on, you can assign it and remove it and uninstall it remotely without having to go and touch the user's device. So quite a powerful tool here in the app section. Then maybe the most topical for what's happening in recently South Africa is endpoint security. South Africa is heavily targeted at the moment by ransomware intrusion attempts. So over here in the endpoint security is where we will control everything regarding locking down a device. The antivirus portion is really just controlling and tweaking Defender. So again, we go in the same method. We would just create a policy, select the endpoint platform, and then just go and start configuring all of the settings within endpoint, making sure that it no longer stays in that out-of-box default configuration state, but we now go and tell the devices when to scan, how often to do definition updates, all of that good stuff to make sure that our devices are protected. Another very nice thing about it is it's got a summary page, so we can at a glance see, is there any devices that are being told to do updates or told to do scans, but they haven't. We can then drill down and investigate. Maybe the person's on leave or the device is not connected to the internet for whatever reason, as well as going and having a look at malware that have been detected in the past on the tenant. Alrighty. Then we can do disk encryption. So this would be your BitLocker. Very similar way of just creating a policy, configuring the settings, and then applying it to the user and or devices that you would like to control. We've got a firewall setting. So this is your Windows firewall that you can manage through the same security portal. And then your endpoint detection and response is another important one. So this is basically once the device is onboarded, if something does happen to the device, do you want to use Microsoft's endpoint detection and response program, where you can choose if it gets submitted to them, you can ask them to do deeper analysis, etc. And that's what we would control from this menu set. Alrighty, then we move on to my favorite one, which is the attack surface reduction policies. As Garry mentioned, Intune plugs into quite a few other portals, a few other places that you would need to holistically look after your your environment, one of them being the security center. So I spend a lot of time in here. Just a free tip for those of you who are concerned about your secure score and you are spending a lot of time managing the score and trying to improve it. In an out-of-box state, you can actually get about 12 to 20% increase in your secure score just by creating a single attack surface reduction policy. So there's quite a few options in here. We're not going to go through them, but once you've gone and created it and just configured all the options, it goes and closes a whole bunch of holes that are sitting on devices that don't have these policies. And it basically raises your score by 12 to 20% because it may not be 12 to 20% of the holes open, but the weighting that Microsoft applies to the holes that sit in this policy are very high. So just a free tip, if anyone wants to boost their secure score and have not yet done so, just open an attack surface reduction policy, read through all the settings and turn everything on that you can turn on. Another very nice thing about attack surface reduction policies is there may be user impact. So for example, our dev team, they love to program in a test environment, and while the app is still in development, they haven't paid for a certificate yet, they haven't published it, and one of the settings is warn if a device is doesn't have a certificate attached to it, and any problem or issue that triggers from an attack surface reduction policy will actually pop up a message in the bottom right in the Windows Notification Center, telling you, first of all, that you've been blocked due to an attack surface reduction policy and what the policy is. So it makes it very easy for an IT administrator to go back and just either exclude the user from if they legitimately need to do the action, or just turn that option off in order to roll back the problem for the user. All right. And then we've got device compliant and conditional access, which is a similar view or pane for doing the things that we showed earlier. So to go to our demo that we will actually be going through all the options in Intune. So Labs has been added into Intune. They've tried it a couple of times. It wasn't perfect compared to the way it used to be through GPO. So a lapse is basically protecting your local administrator password. So you can see here, it's a local admin password solution. So this is a common thing in many environments where you need to actually have your local admin on a device. Commonly in the past, it saved you a lot if the device, for example, lost the trust relationship with the domain. We've seen that happen quite a few times. However, just because of the nature of needing to keep track of passwords and just from an admin point of view, we would often go and set a whole bunch of local admin passwords. We'd enable it and we'd set it to all be the same. So what Labs does is it goes and automatically sets that password on your behalf. It randomizes it and it makes sure it's unique. So you have an issue, you need to get onto the local admin account. It's not a set password. It's a safe one that hasn't been replicated across the network. And you have the ability to anytime go and discover what that password is safely and securely. So this gets around a lot of the pass the hash attacks and a lot of the lateral movement attacks where one user's device will be compromised and the attacker will then be able to go and basically move sideways across the network because they now have the local admin password. So to run through the settings, we will just quickly click over there to say create policy. We'll select the platform, which at the moment, unfortunately, it's only available for Windows. And then we'll choose a lapse option over here. Okay. This lapse policy is what's called a CSP policy. So if you have other settings, maybe through GPO or another device managing software that controls lapse, this is seen as a master. So even if you have a device that was once controlled by lapse, but you scrapped the program, you don't know where the GPO is, how to get into it, this will overwrite it. So anything we do in here will become the master if you do it through Intune. All right, and then we can see our configuration settings. So the first thing that we can do is we can go and set up a backup directory. We do need to be very careful over here as this depends on the device state. So as you can see, we can just have it not backed up. We can back up the password to Azure AD only, or the name needs to be updated here. This is obviously your intro. And we can also have the option to back up the password to Active Directory only. So the reason why it's important to know the device's state is, for example, if it is a cloud-only device, we set to back up the password to AD Directory only. This is now going to fail, and we're not going to have that password backed up because it's not talking to a local AD. It doesn't know where to put the password. And very similar with an Intro device. If it hasn't been connected to the cloud, if it's only local joined, then choosing this option is going to cause a problem. Then we can select the administrator account name. The only time we would do this is if the administrator account name has been changed. Obviously, by default on every Windows device, you have a local admin account that's created and disabled. So if you have gone and created your own one and standardized it, you would then select this and then go and type in case sensitive, the name that you have given the local admin's account. However, if you have not and only the default local admin account is in there, you actually leave it not configured because it will then know to use the default naming convention that Microsoft uses. We can go and set the password complexity for these lapse passwords that it generates. Obviously, they will recommend to you to go very, very complex, which is the default. So they have funny wording here. For capital letters, they say large letters. So large letters, small letters, numbers, and special characters. Okay. So we would recommend to use this one. The only reason why someone would use a lesser configured is it's just easier than to go put in the password. But because a local admin account should be used so infrequently, our recommendation would be go most secure and just put in that big boy password whenever it's needed. You can also configure the password length. So by default, it sits on 14. Again, you would only lower this down to make it more convenient to put the password in. We would recommend leaving it at 14 or even upping that. You can then also set post authentication actions. So these are what happens if a device, because labs will cycle through these passwords. So what will happen when a cycle happens, and let's say, for example, this is a desktop that stays on 24/7 because it's running an application. So our three options are after the password is reset, after that time period that we set give it, it will just restart the password and nothing will happen to the device. Basically, it will stay logged in with the old password. We can then reset the password and log off the account. So once the grace period hits and the password has reset, it will log the account out. You wouldn't want this where an application is running 24/7, but if it's just a user device, you might want to then force it to log off so it registers that change. And then we can also reboot the device based on the grace period. Okay, and then we can also put a delay to any of those actions. So this is in hours. Let's say we want the device to restart, but we only want it to happen 24 hours after the password expires. We'll go ahead and do that. Alrighty. Then you can put scope tabs to it if you want. We won't go into those. And then you basically just assign it to the device or the user that you want to assign it to. Okay. So you've configured it. You've pushed it to a device. How do we now use lapse? We have a problem. Computers lost the trust relationship to the domain. How do we now go and get that password? So we would basically go back to our devices tab. We would search for the device. So let's say again, we are looking at this laptop that we were trying to troubleshoot earlier. I will go ahead and click on it. And as long as I have assigned this user or this device to that lapse password, I will be able to go to the local admin password over here and then get some information. So I can click on this link over here, which says show local administrator password. And then I can copy it to my clipboard and use it to log into this device and do what I need to do with it. Maybe just leave the domain and join it again so that the trust relationship is restored, install an app, whatever we need this local admin password for. All right. So it is set on by default onto a 30-day timer, but we do have the ability to overwrite that or whatever we've configured. So let's say, for example, I realize, oh no, I've just done a live demo and I've shown everyone a password that's potentially on a live device that we are actually using and I need to keep secure. So what we would do in that case is just run back to our overview of the device and then using the ellipsis in the top right hand corner here. So the more options, just click on it and just choose the rotate local admin password option and just force it to do another sync and change that local admin password for me. Alrighty. So that brings us to the end of the demo. We hope that it was helpful. And as we mentioned, if there's anything that you would like a deeper drill down into, just let us know and we'll be happy to set up a private session with everyone.
Thank you very much, Luke. Yeah, that was awesome. And hopefully everybody found it extremely enlightening. As Luke said, if you go into a demo on the entire Intune, you'll be here for days. But yeah, thank you very much. I think we're going to go into a Q&A now.
Absolutely. If you do have any questions, feel free to raise your virtual hand. Otherwise, you're welcome to also add it into the chat in the group, and we'll keep an eye out for it, and we'll make sure we get you some answers on those as well. Thanks again, Luke.
Oh, sorry. There are two questions from Ryan in the Q&A. So the first one is, when enrolling iOS personal devices, is there a way you can configure it to wipe company data and apps only similar to the Android work profile?
Luke, you can handle that?
Yeah, so I haven't done it on Intune to confirm, but I do know that when you have the devices marked as personal and not corporate, that's when how you differentiate between what gets wiped between things. So yeah, to be honest, I haven't checked that.
Can we look into that?
Yeah, we can look into it and get back to you.
Awesome. And then the other one from Ryan is, do policy assignments need to be device groups, or can you use user assigned groups also?
So you can use both. The only warning that we would give is make sure you're using one or the other. Unfortunately, Microsoft does give you the option to use both, and it's just caused so much headaches in the past. So we recommend choose one. We like to use user because we know that that user will then, you don't have, every time a new device comes in, we don't have to add that device to a device group, make sure it's synced up, all of that extra admin. So we use user. The only time you wouldn't want to use a user is when it's a shared device and maybe different people logging into that device need different subsets of settings. So yes, you can use two, but we would suggest pick one.
Yeah, I just wanted to say there is a use case for device only, but default to user if you can.
Awesome. Thank you, gents. We have another question from Sean, who asks, is there a way to limit logon on Windows device to primary users only?
So that is a yes and a no. It's not a native feature of Intune. However, you can use a script pushed by Intune to do that. So basically what will happen is with the autopilot settings, you can say that the first user to log in will be assigned as the primary user. And then when they log in and autopilot pushes down all the policies, you then have a script running to say, so it uses something called, I don't know, Garry, if you can refresh my memory, but there is a local GPO policy settings that says authorized users, or it's basically a thing that controls who can log in, and that script pushes the primary user into that group
That local group,
and
yes.
only that person. So again, you would need something like Laps or something if you wanted to sign in with someone else.
There's a hand up, Brian.
Yes, there is. Admin, is it
Noel.
Noel
No.
from Saheti?
No, how's it?
Hi there,
How's
Noel.
it, guys? Luke, how's it? How are you?
How's it?
Good, thanks, and you?
Good, good. This was very informative. I actually want to thank Justin for this. Luke, I think we've been actually chatting for a while with regards to our Intune setup at Saheti. And I think I have made quite a few leaps in regards to what I've managed to deploy over and above SCCM. I completely just don't want to deal with SCCM. That, like you guys said, old technology. I actually want to switch the server off. So once I can do that. Sorry, my question was with regards to one of the questions that was asked earlier, and I don't know if you could maybe point me in the right direction. I had a whole issue in terms of enrollment where personal versus corporate devices were kind of giving me an issue. So I tried to find a workaround, and dynamic queries seem to have helped with regards to personal versus corporate. So I put in a dynamic query to separate personal versus corporate, and that worked out very well in terms of my deployments, conditional accesses, so on and so forth. So any personal devices that come in, those don't get conditional access policies. They basically have nothing to do with Saheti, because I made the mistake of, and I'll be honest, I made the mistake of deleting personal devices that were enrolled, and those people were they were not happy with me. So that's very cool. Also, in terms of deployment of applications, and I will speak to Justin, Luke, so I can set up maybe some time with you. I know through Argantic we got a few hours, so I'd like to do that. Our applications that I've deployed, I've managed to successfully deploy quite a few applications. However, like you said, if in a perfect world, MSIs are the best ways to go. Install commands for EXEs now, that's a bane to my existence. Okay, so that's where I'm like, I just don't want to deal with this right now. We'll do a manual installation if need be. However, system versus users, I've noticed that where it becomes a bit tricky is that our staff have local admin rights, but our students don't, obviously for specific reasons. Yet when deploying applications, I've noticed that if you specify system over users, you can actually get those applications to deploy without requiring local admin rights, you understand? So all depending on schools versus corporate environments. Yeah, I think corporate environments might be a little bit more lenient. I'm not too sure. Please don't quote me on this. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I've been looking into that I've been playing around with. So I'm hoping that if I can sit with Luke and maybe schedule a session that we can record to go through my Intune setup. For anyone that's just starting in Intune right now, my suggestion would be to create groups, and create groups. So that's where you would start from. And then once your groups are created, then you'll know how to deploy specific things, because everything is assigned to a group. A group is not assigned to anything else, you understand? So yeah, thank you very much for this share. I mean, even with Laps, we are currently looking into that now. One last question from myself. Because we are a hybrid setup here at Saheti, okay, can we run Laps, AD Laps and Windows Laps simultaneously, because we haven't moved full enrollment just yet to Intune?
So to answer that question where you've got a mix, you can run it concurrently, but if there's one that's in a hybrid state, whatever is being pushed to it via GPO will be overwritten by the Intune policy. So basically what will happen is you can push it to cloud only and hybrid devices, and the hybrid devices will just be overruled, and the cloud devices will get what's set in Intune as well. So as you then enroll more devices and hybrid them or move them to cloud only, Intune will stay the master basically. So it's not going to cause a conflict. Intune will overrule whatever's sitting on your on-prem configuration.
That is brilliant. I mean, the GPO enrollment that we did from our local AD seemed to work quite well. I've managed to enroll quite a few devices at Saheti, and I mean, even feature updates. Windows, 24H2 been rolling out quite nicely. Thanks for this. I do appreciate it, Luke. Thanks,
No
guys.
problem.
Thanks, Noel.
So
Thanks,
just
Noel.
to quickly touch on a question there. So just to point out the personal and corporate devices, some people get confused on how do I know which one is which. So this actually really, if you want to control it, will go down to enrollment method. If you, for example, have used autopilot or used the GPO to automatically enroll a device using the logged in user, this will flag the device as corporate. If you use another method, such as, for example, when a user is on their home device and they've signed into Teams, I'm sure you've all seen this, where you get a pop-up and it says this organization would like to enroll your device. And you can either say yes, or you can check a box that says no, use this, sign into this app only. If you say yes, it will then flag that device as a personal device because it knows your method of enrolling seemed to have come from a personal way instead of a corporate way.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke. And thanks, Noel. That was great to get some context and insight from your perspective as well. Thank you for that. We've got some other questions coming through. Could we possibly be given a trial of Intune? We do love giving trials to customers whenever possible. So I think that's a yes across the board. Please get in touch with our team and we'll certainly arrange something that so you can test the technology out and see for yourselves. The next question from Vanna: how does Intune handle failed device enrollments? Does it auto retry, or do you have to push it again if there are no issues in logs, etc.?
Okay, so this will depend on how you are setting the enrollment up. The most common way being pushing a GPO. So if you do have a hybrid scenario, pushing a GPO that says whenever a user logs in, register the device to that signed in user. So basically, for example, in this scenario, because you've put the enrollment event at login, if it fails, the next time that a user is logged out or the device is restarted or shut down and rebooted, the next time the user tries to log in, it will try to trigger another event. So the GPO will run again, it will try and register the user. And if it is still failing, we basically would then use the event viewer to go into the login event. There is a section for attempts to enroll, and then we would use the event code there and the error message that it spits out to troubleshoot it further.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Luke. And next one from Martin. Can someone manage their Windows 11 end user device upgrade project using Intune?
Okay, is this going from 10 to 11?
Let's check. Martin, are you able to chat?
Yes. Okay. So
Yes.
I believe I have actually come across that. I can't remember if it was in the security compliance or if it was in the Windows updates. But you basically give it, I think maybe it's under the feature updates. I'll confirm and get back to you, but I have seen it where you give a minimum version. So let's say Windows 10 21H2, and once the device has fallen behind that, it must upgrade to, and then you can choose Windows 11. Just recently, we've had a lot of issues with this. I don't know if anyone else has come across this, but a device just fails to go past a certain version of Windows 10, and it will say you've reached the end of life and you need to update, but it's disabled. And you have to then use the Windows Installation Assistant. 90% of the cases, this will push you past that. The other 10% of the cases is the TPN is disabled in the BIOS, so you don't actually meet the minimum requirements.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks, Luke.
Thank you, Taza, gentlemen. Thanks for that. Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. So you're saying there are maybe some limitations, that happen from time to time. But for the most part, a manual installation should get us over the line.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a couple of remediation steps, but yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
the technology itself of Intune, one of its features is the management of that upgrade process. So I think, for the most part, it'll handle it. There are always outliers, and whether it's TPM or whether it's legacy hardware or anything like that, but those you can obviously handle on a kind of on case basis. But for the most part, the technology is available to do it for you. Yes.
Okay, sweet. Thanks very much, gentlemen. Thanks.
Excellent.
Martin.
Sure.
Thank you. We have a hand up. That is Lone.
Oh, hi, sorry. It was just on Martin's question with the upgrade to Windows 11. We actually did ours from Windows 10 to 11 through Intune. I think the setting is on the update ring where you specify whether you can update from 10 to 11.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
obviously just roll it
So-
out in a
Yes.
phased approach was our work best because some of the we've got some devices that weren't compatible, so a phased approach worked a bit better. But yeah, it is possible.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks,
you.
Lone.
Thank you.
There's a question from David about any Mac OS updates handled natively by Intune.
So I know you can set the minimum requirement. In other words, you can say device needs to be this level. I have never pushed the actual updates though via Intune, so I will not. I'm assuming it's there because you can do it on Windows, but I cannot unfortunately confirm that. That's something I'll have to check and confirm.
I see there's a section for it, but it's always been there as Intune evolved. Like for instance, the encryption section of the hard drive, all it told you was whether the hard drive was encrypted or not.
Yeah.
Never natively had the ability to force the user to actually encrypt it, but I don't know if that's changed.
Yeah, my understanding as well is that it absolutely is able to handle the updates, but there are limitations to it. And I think it actually lists some of those limitations around updating user policies and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Yes, with caveats. Yeah.
It's like everything with Microsoft. Yes, but.
Great. I'm just checking if we have missed any
There's
other questions.
2 additional ones in the Q&A. So Garry just answered that one from David, and we've answered from Sean in the chat. So Rakesh asks, we have an existing deployment of Intune. Are you able to do a health/sanity check the current deployment, and provide recommendations?
Absolutely, yes.
Cool. And then Barney asks, any recommendation with how to approach Intune with on-site file servers and AD servers?
So are you talking about putting those actual physical servers into Intune?
Hi guys.
Just to clarify,
We're sitting with about 40 odd, but we're still old school. We're in the middle of nowhere. Our file server, we're sitting at about 6 terabytes. That's the one file server. And then we've got the planning side of things. We're a gold mine, so there's a separate server just for planning and all that kind of stuff, which is also sitting at about 4 terabytes. So it's still old school. We've been, everybody's pushing for Intune, but whenever internet goes down, we don't have any access to the outside world. How to approach, let's say in an event, internet goes down, will the user still be able to access either the on-site hybrid kind of setup without there being internet?
Yes. So if you have it in a hybrid state, obviously what will happen then, for example, is everything's working, the internet's up. As you're about to push a policy or do something on the device, the internet goes down. The device will still be usable. Any pre-applied policies will still be present. They can continue to talk to the file servers internally because they're connected on the internal network. But anything new you do in the cloud from an Intune point won't reach the device until internet connection is restored.
Cool. But it's doable still leaving your on-site. I'd call it the file servers. I'll leave that. Eventually get rid of the AD and then just use the Azure part for the authentication and that kind of stuff.
Yes, that's
That
still
is correct, yeah.
perfect.
Okay.
And the cache will also stay on the device. So even if the Intune connection is down, In this case, you might want to consider keeping your DC up locally, because then the user can still authenticate. But even if your DC is not there, the user account is still cached. So as long as you don't swap users on the device and the same user signs in, they'll still be able to log into the machine and do what they need to do.
Yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely.
No,
Don't get rid of your on-prem AD until your internet connection is rock solid.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Excellent. Nice question. Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Great.
I think we're
Okay.
at 1 o'clock there,
I
right?
think we are at exactly 1 o'clock. So thank you again, guys. Garry, Luke, really appreciate it. Thanks to everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed the session. I hope it was very insightful. Please look out for our next sessions. The invites will be going out very shortly, and we look forward to hosting you again. So thank you all, and have a fantastic rest of your week. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Cheers,
Thanks,
thanks.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Guys,
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Go well. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Take